News out of Utah. Podcaster and Republican activist Charlie Kirk is dead after being shot during a debate.
Well, Kirk was about 20 minutes into his speech when shots were fired from a nearby building.
Fellow Americans, I am filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah.
Imagine a clear afternoon on a university campus, students filling the courtyard, voices rising and falling like hum of restless bees, some leaning in to catch every word of the speaker, others whispering arguments to one another. It was supposed to be another ordinary event. A young but controversial figure was standing on stage, microphone in hand, gesturing passionately as he challenged students to think, debate, and push back. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of excitement, irritation, and curiosity. Then, in one terrible instant, everything changed. A sound tore through the air, sharp, violent, unmistakable. For a heartbeat, the crowd froze. Was it a firework? A prank? But as the echo bounced off the surrounding buildings, the truth became undeniable. People screamed. Panic spread like wildfire. And on the stage, the speaker staggered back, clutching his neck, his eyes wide with shock as crimson bloomed across his shirt. The courtyard erupted into chaos. The atmosphere before the attack. Utah Valley University in Orem had become a frequent stop for controversial voices. The campus prided itself on open dialogue, often inviting figures who stirred fierce debate. On this day, the quad was buzzing long before the event began. Students clustered around the tented stage area, some eager to hear the guest, others ready to challenge him. Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, was no stranger to confrontation. At just 31, he had become a symbol of youth-driven conservatism, admired and despised in equal measure. His reputation guaranteed that every speech he gave drew both supporters and critics. The sun was bright, the air dry, and the mountains loomed quietly in the distance, as if watching over what would unfold. For those gathered, it was a rare opportunity to test their voices against someone who thrived on debate. What no one knew was that somewhere, from a distance of 100 to 200 yards away, another presence lurked, silent, patient, and armed. The moment of violence. Charlie had been speaking for nearly 20 minutes when it happened. He had just finished challenging the audience to think critically about America's rising tide of violence. Ironically, his final words before the chaos were about the need for open dialogue over aggression. Then came the shot. Witnesses later described hearing a single crack, almost like a firecracker. A red mist followed, and the crowd gasped as Charlie collapsed. His security team sprang into action, rushing him off stage as horrified students scattered in every direction. Some dropped to the ground. Others bolted for cover inside nearby buildings. Screams, shouts, and a stampede of hundreds of feet filled the once peaceful courtyard. Videos began surfacing within minutes, shaky cell phone footage showing panicked faces, people stumbling over benches, and sirens wailing in the background. By the time paramedics arrived, the scene was already a swirl of flashing lights and desperate prayers, confusion and fear. At first, rumors flew wildly. Was there more than one shooter? Was this a targeted assassination or a random act of violence? The police initially detained someone near the scene, only to confirm later that he wasn't involved. That mistake deepened the sense of fear. The real shooter was still out there, free. Meanwhile, students trapped inside classrooms whispered updates through text messages. Social media lit up with frantic posts, some begging loved ones to pick them up, others condemning the violence before the facts were even clear. The Losi Center, a tall building adjacent to the quad, quickly became the focus of the investigation. Witnesses swore the gunshot had echoed from its direction. It seemed to offer the perfect vantage point, high-shadowed and overlooking the stage. The announcement, hours later, the news broke. Despite the frantic efforts of medical teams, Charlie Kirk had succumbed to his injury. A single bullet to the neck had ended his life at 31 years old. The announcement rippled through news networks. On Real America's Voice, the stunned hosts struggled to speak as confirmation reached them live on air. Longtime acquaintances wept openly. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Political opponents, even those who had sparred fiercely with him, released statements condemning the violence. Representative Ro Khanna called it chilling and horrific. Governor Gavin Newsom labeled it vile and reprehensible. Utah's own Governor Cox promised accountability, vowing that those responsible would face justice. Yet for all the statements, the same chilling fact remained. The shooter was still on the loose. A nation reacts. The shock went beyond Utah. For many, Charlie's death was not just about one man, but about a nation teetering on the edge. The debate over political violence, already burning hot, flared brighter than ever. Was this the tragic result of years of escalating rhetoric, or the act of a lone, deranged individual? Commentators from across the spectrum weighed in. Some pointed to the poisonous atmosphere of division. Others focused on the availability of guns. A few even whispered about conspiracies. Meanwhile, families of students who had witnessed the shooting held them close, grateful their children had survived, but shaken by the trauma they now carried. Glenn Beck, the conservative commentator, revealed that his own daughter had been in the crowd that day. His voice cracked as he described her terror. And somewhere out there, the shooter remained silent, his identity unknown, his motives unclear. By the end of that day, Utah Valley University was no longer just a campus. It had become a crime scene, a symbol, and the setting for a tragedy that would echo across the country. But this was only the beginning. Behind the headlines, behind the sorrow, lay deeper questions. Who pulled the trigger and why? Was this an isolated act or part of something larger, darker, and more dangerous? The answers would not come easily. A campus in shock. By sunrise the next morning, Utah Valley University looked like a different place. The cheerful banners advertising student events had been overshadowed by yellow police tape. Patrol cars lined the campus entrances. News vans set up outside, their antennas stretching toward the sky. Reporters rehearsing live shots while students shuffled past with haunted expressions. The quad, once a lively hub, was now frozen in silence. Flowers and candles appeared at the edge of the taped-off area. A makeshift memorial for a man many loved, many disliked, but none expected to see gunned down in front of them. For the students who had been there, the sound of that single shot still echoed. Some described reliving the moment every time they closed their eyes. The sharp crack, the stunned gasp, the chaos. Others refused to return to campus at all, their nerves too frayed to walk past the site. Counselors were dispatched in droves, but healing would not come quickly. The hunt for the shooter, law enforcement agencies converged on Orem. The FBI, ATF, and local police worked around the clock, combing through security footage, analyzing ballistics. That same day, a school shooting in Denver claimed more young victims, overshadowed by the Utah tragedy, but still a chilling reminder of the broader crisis. And interviewing terrified witnesses, the initial mistake of arresting the wrong man had shaken confidence. And now, officials were under immense pressure to find the real suspect. The Lossie Center became the focal point of investigation. Investigators believed the shooter had taken position there, scanning the crowd before pulling the trigger. Yet the building's cameras told only fragments of the story: grainy figures, blurred outlines, shadows moving in stairwells. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some insisted the assassin was a trained sniper. Others speculated about political groups, foreign agents, or disgruntled individuals with personal vendettas. Each theory carried its own dark weight, but none offered closure. The political earthquake. News of Charlie Kirk's death sent shockwaves far beyond Utah. Washington, D.C. buzzed with urgency, senators and representatives offering statements of sympathy while subtly weaving their own political narratives. On the left, leaders condemned gun culture, arguing this was the inevitable outcome of unchecked violence. On the right, allies portrayed Charlie as a martyr, a man who had dared to speak boldly until silenced by hatred. Cable news networks ran wall-to-wall coverage, panelists dissecting every angle, from gun laws to political rhetoric to campus safety. Hashtags exploded across social media. Hashtag justice for Charlie. Hashtag end political violence. Hashtag never again. Even those who disagreed with him in life found themselves pausing in death. Opponents admitted they had sparred with him fiercely, but had never wished for this. Supporters wept openly, declaring that his mission must now be carried forward with greater determination. A family in mourning. Behind the headlines was a grieving family. Charlie's wife, Erica, faced the unthinkable task of explaining to their children why their father was never coming home. Friends described her as strong, but her eyes carried the weight of disbelief. Private footage later surfaced of the security team rushing him to a car after the shot, their faces pale with urgency. For many, it was almost too painful to watch, a reminder that behind the political firebrand was a husband, a father, a son. Condolences poured in from allies and adversaries alike. Some were heartfelt, others felt hollow. But in the quiet of their home, away from the cameras, the family wrestled with a grief no statement could heal. Voices from the crowd. Among the shaken students were stories that highlighted both terror and humanity. One young woman recounted dragging her friend to cover behind a bench, both of them trembling as they prayed the shooter wouldn't fire again. Another student described hearing a professor shout, "Get inside, now," before herding dozens of panicked undergrads into a lecture hall. Glenn Beck's daughter, only 19, had been standing close to the stage. Later, her father's voice cracked on air as he admitted how close she had come to tragedy. "She could have been in the line of fire," he whispered. His grief mirrored that of countless parents across the nation, fearful for their children's safety in a world where violence could erupt at any moment. A divided nation. While vigils and prayers continued, the nation's divisions sharpened. Testers gathered outside courthouses and Capitol buildings, some demanding stricter gun control, others warning against politicizing the tragedy. Debates that had already fractured America now carried the ghost of Charlie Kirk as fuel. Talk radio hosts thundered about silencing conservative voices. Activists rallied against hate-fueled violence. In online forums, conspiracy theories multiplied, each more far-fetched than the last. Some claimed the government staged the shooting. Others insisted it was carried out by extremists from the opposite side of the political spectrum. Truth became a casualty in the storm of speculation. Echoes beyond Utah. As investigators scrambled for leads, the violence echoed in other corners of the nation. Americans were left to ask hard questions. How had the country reached a point where public debate ended not in applause or argument, but in gunfire? Was this the symptom of a sick culture, or the beginning of something even darker? Searching for meaning. For those who admired Charlie Kirk, his death was framed as a call to action. For his critics, it was a moment to reflect on the futility of hatred. For students, it became a permanent scar, a reminder that safety was never guaranteed. In churches, synagogues, and mosques across the country, prayers were lifted not only for Charlie's family, but for the healing of a nation on edge. Leaders urged calm, pleading with citizens to reject violence before it swallowed the very foundation of democracy. Yet amid all the speeches, a simple truth remained. One young man's life had been cut short, and no debate could bring him back. The story of that day in Utah is not just the story of a bullet. It is the story of fear and courage, of a family's grief and a nation's soul-searching. It is the story of how one shot can ripple outward, igniting debates, deepening divides, and forcing everyone, friend and foe alike, to confront what kind of future they want. The shooter may have vanished into the shadows, but the questions remain. How many more voices will be silenced before America learns to listen instead of destroy? How many more families will mourn before politics remembers its humanity? For now, the campus lies quiet, the memorial candles flickering in the night breeze. But beneath the silence, the echoes remain, echoes of a nation shaken, a family broken, and a society searching desperately for answers.